All right, so welcome.
Hello.
Friends of Life University, I'd like to welcome my guest today, Kim Chesney. She's the owner of Mystic Studios, author of the book, The Psychic Workshop, a complete program for fulfilling your spiritual potential. She's an artist. My daughter has two of her lovely mandala paintings on her wall as we speak. They're beautiful. And the creator of the Intuition Revolution, which I love that name because it really is very meaningful. Even in the title, it gives you the idea of what it is right whenever you hear that word. So tell me a little bit about what the Intuition Revolution is.
Yeah, well, it's kind of, it functions. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's so nice to be here. And I'm really excited to talk to you guys about intuition today. And I'm so nice to have met you and learn about the work that you're doing. So this intuition revolution stuff that I've been working on over the past decade really focuses on both an internal mechanism and a global mechanism. Within us, there's sort of this parallel experience happening on a microcosm and the macrocosm of humanity and people as individuals making a shift towards intuitive cognitive function as opposed to relying strictly on our linear thinking. We've spent centuries relying on our information systems, and now we have created information systems that are beyond us. We've created technology that within years is going to be smarter than we are, and it's going to outsmart us. So really our human innovation in terms of what's going to differentiate us from machines, at least for a while, in the near future, is our intuitive ability. We have this innate part of us that we haven't tapped into, that all of us have deep inside, but we've kind of let it atrophy because we've relied on information. We've relied on our knowledge systems, and it's been taught out of us since we were kids because we've learned to do things sequentially and linearly. So now we're sort of circling back as a people around the world to embrace this intuitive thinking, even in our personal lives, in our spiritual lives, in our business lives, in technology. All of the world is on different levels embracing this intuitive thinking, and it's really kind of a magical process. And I just am so excited to help to levitate that energy.
I like that, levitate that energy. Yeah, I was actually going to mention that, I think we do get it taught out of us. We start to be taught how to think, how to feel, what to do, the shoulds of the world. And I was going to ask you, do you think it's a use it or lose it thing? And I think you just kind of answered that there, where once you start learning what to do from other people, that's very mental. And I spent my life, that's how I got started in this work, looking for the answers from other people and trying to figure out who had the answers. Was it church? Was it your elders? Was it, your parents? Was it your friends? Was it the job that you had? Was it, all of those different things? And in the end, it really comes down to, it's this internal guide that tells you this way or that way, which is your intuition.
Yep.
Everybody's path is different.
Yep.
And now, I agree with you that we have to relearn it. And it's really interesting. I was talking to my mom this week, and we were saying how it's sort of an amnesia. Once you get into your mindset, you lose your internal intuition guide. And when you're very much in touch with your intuition, you're not looking at things from that mental perspective. And so they're very different outlooks as you go through life, which I think...
Well, Einstein said, or was, attributed to, said, we don't know, this is one of his contentious quotes, is that the intuition, the intuition is a sacred gift, and the mind is its faithful servant. So regardless of who said that, I think it's really a profound statement of like you said, they're different functions, but there's an order in which they need to work. And we've spent so much time putting our intellect first and letting everything fall under that. But the reality is there's a higher way of thinking that's above intellect. Intuition is the supreme cognitive function. It has instant access to knowledge. It's like the wormhole that takes us from the question to the answer instead of having to work through 25 mathematical algorithms, right? So getting our perspective in order, starting with intuition, and then letting the mind serve our intuition, That's our natural, it's the way we're built naturally. It's the way that we need to retrain and reprogram our minds to function.
And I think that's why we're struggling in the world, is because we've switched that. Like you said, we're following the mind now, not following the heart. And another quote keeps popping in my mind of someone had asked one of the Native American chiefs at some point, about the white man at that time coming over. And he said, we think they're mad. And he said, why? He's like, because they're looking crazy with their eyes. They're always in their mind, and they're thinking from their head. And they said, well, where do you think from? And he pointed to here.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an intelligent force in our core, and that gut instinct that we talk about. And the heart energy is actually 60 times greater than the energy of the brain. And we just don't know that. So we keep closing that down and turning on the brain. And they also say too, when you tune into your intuition and you're getting that core, peaceful, present moment, you actually become more intelligent because you're tuning in to a higher energy, like you said, of the intuition in that core. And so we can really change the world in a more positive way just with that switch. So I think what you're doing is really, really important. And I love that we're trying to spread that message even in our area where, it's not a common thing that people talk about every day.
Right. And I think it's also an important point to talk about semantics. And when we say we follow our heart, that can be a tricky thing because people oftentimes say they equate the heart with intuition. And on some level it does. I mean, it's definitely closer to the heart than it is to the mind. But we also, want to be sure we're not telling you to follow your emotions and your feelings, right? So when you're following your heart, you're really following your dreams. You're following your intuition. You're following your higher guidance. Anything that's related to your feelings, desires, needs, wants, all of that has nothing to do with intuition. So that's our ego. So we really have to be sure, when we're talking about intuition, that we're separating our ego. Because if you follow your heart, C.S. Lewis said this, if you follow your heart will lead you astray. And your heart's not going to be the thing that takes you to God. What takes you to God is going to be this going from this still place, like you said a minute ago, the still quiet place of peace. That's the place where you find God. It's not in our ego drives and emotions and our attachments, right?
Exactly. So how do you teach people to differentiate between what is that heart emotion, what is that thought thought idea versus your intuition knowing?
So basically that's a really good question. So I teach something called holistic intuition, and that is an approach to intuition for body, mind, heart, and spirit. So I have broken down intuition into basically aligning with the 4 cognitive functions that you hear about in the Myers-Briggs and Carl Jung of body, mind, heart, and spirit. So intuition communicates through those pathways for us. So once we start to understand what physical intuition is versus like mental, practical intuition and creative, like the heart for me is the creative intuition. Like it's the passion. It's what things we're moved to do. Like we do things with heart because we believe in it and we care about it and it's meaningful to us, right? So it's in those terms of transformation and growth that I interpret the sort of the heart side of things. And then there's the mystical side, which is the spiritual side. So basically anything that is associated with your ego or your personal identification has to be tossed out the window when we're working with intuition. That's why it's much easier to practice intuition on other people because you don't have any personal investment. Or just use techniques or workshops with like cards and things like that, because we get very caught up in our own personal aspirations and the things that we want to do with our life, so we can be blinded to our intuition. So anytime that there's a personal interest in it, we have to second guess our intuition. We have to be very critical of whether or not that's a genuine intuition.
And it's a learned thing. You really have to be very present. Meditation is wonderful for that. And I know that word is another word that has a lot of judgment to it, but literally just sitting in the silence to say, where is this coming from? You can feel it in your body. And Martha Beck, one of my favorite life coaches, says our bodies are like supercomputers that we use as drink coasters. because we're not really realizing how much information and intelligence, we get just by realizing our body is a receiver of energy. And, where is this coming from? Is it up here? Is it stressful? Is it, like you said, in the heart? Is it a desire? Or is it just this sort of core, like nobody can tell you different kind of knowing? And you can't really determine that unless you practice it. So I wanted to ask you the next thing, which is what the main focus of what my business really is taking all this information and turning it into practical use for everyday, ordinary, modern life. There's the spiritual aspect, like you said, but that's not all that it's about. It's a very practical, use for everyday life in your job, in your relationships. So how do you use intuition like in your normal, everyday, ordinary life?
Yeah, I mean, there's like a million ways, and people really don't get that. Some people, I meet people that don't understand intuition, and they think it's like spooky or something crazy, but they just don't get it yet. They just don't understand it yet, because most of what I teach is really practical intuition on different levels. The spiritual intuition is really just a piece of it. The things that people traditionally associate with intuition is just a small piece of it. But what the whole gamut of intuition really revolves around using it to make the best choices in our life and to live our truth, right? So and that is tied into our spiritual development, but it is also tied into very practical things like our everyday happiness and fulfillment. So we can use our intuition on a daily basis. Practical intuition, you use it like a million times a day. Like, oh, should I drive this way to work? Or should I buy this piece of clothing? Are these shoes going to hurt my feet? Right? Little things where you just don't have access to an answer. You just kind of go through the resonance in your head, like, this just doesn't feel right, or yeah, this does feel right. I think I'm going to get this, right? So shopping, oh my God, women, we use intuition all the time. Right? Some days you have great days because your intuition is on and it's just like boom, 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 and you get all this stuff. And other days you buy all this crap and you're like, man, why did I get this? Like, none of this is working. This didn't feel right even when you were buying it, right? So those are just some simple ways, but really it applies to any choice we make in our life. We can use our intuition.
And I want to add to that too. I was talking to a family member about this, and she was like, do you mean in every second I need to stop and I need to evaluate and ask myself, do I do this or do I do that? And I said, well, no, but you can eventually. It's like driving a car. At first, there's so many pieces, and you have to, like we said, if you're not familiar with how to tune into it, it's a lot of work to try to figure it out and then tune in and do I want to do this, do I that? But eventually you just get in the car and drive. You don't even think about it. And when it's turned off, or you only think of it as, we've been taught to understand it, where it's just this thing that happens every now and again, then yeah, it's a little bit more work and you might have to do that in the beginning. But eventually you're so tuned into it, it's just a part of mindfulness of going through your life that you get that instant, hit of knowing. And Martha Beck also, just to quote her again, she's like, you'll get this feeling inside of you. Like if it's a no, it's that kind of you turn away from it and you lean back from it. If it's a yes, it pulls you toward it. And she likes to say it's what wants to happen. What wants to happen. And I always say you are the path. Well, that means your intuition is going to lead you down your perfect path, and it's what feels good. It's what draws you in. It's those yeses. So I think intuition is 100% vital to living your path. And people always say, well, what is my path? That's how you find your path.
Absolutely.
Do you think the same thing?
You just follow your intuition.
Yeah.
It knows the way.
Exactly. So do you have any other specifics about how to tune into your intuition? We talked a little bit about it. Is there anything practical that you tell people this is one way to really hear it?
Yeah. So the way I teach intuition is understanding it in terms of a two-step process. So there is a receptive process of receiving information from the universe, which we do passively, which we often find on our first impressions. So when you always heard the expression, first impressions never lie. So that's your intuition. You meet somebody new and you just don't like them for some reason. There's literally no rational explanation. You try and rationalize it. People think you're crazy, but you just have a bad feeling, right? So that's an example of an intuition. And it works on that level, in that first impression level, all the time. Because the trick is with intuition, because our minds are so strong, is we have to catch our intuition before the mind comes in and crushes it.
I was thinking that when you said that, that first impression, is it I'm going to judge that person by their look as a first impression, or are you feeling the energy of the
It's
room?
definitely not a judgment. Once you're judging, discerning, all of that stuff, once you're doing that, you've already passed intuition.
Right.
Intuition happens in an instant, right?
Say
So
that.
when you're judging or when you're assessing, your mind is saying, okay, they have this certain type of clothes on, which creepy people wear. So, or this, that, that's the mind, right? So as soon as you start going from thought to thought to thought, forget it, your intuition, you missed it. The intuition was there and gone already. So the intuition is in a minute, in a second, immediately. And it can be a feeling, it can be a thought, it can be any kind of impression. And I go into that in my, I teach a masterclass that we're in the middle of right now on mastering your intuition. It's a 6-week immersion, and we go through the details on how you actually recognize the difference between your thought that pops in your head and an intuition that pops in your head. And there are ways to do that. So once you've decided that something, or not decided, but you've recognized and honored the fact that this is an intuition that you've received, that's the first step. Okay, so I have an intuition, I have to honor it. So what do you do at that point? Then you have to act on it. So you don't pretend like that intuition never happened, because intuition wants to manifest. It wants to come through us. The whole point with our intuition is coming through the cosmic universe and becoming real in our reality. So when we don't listen to our intuition, we create a block. We create an intuitive block and an energy block. And that's bad for our bodies. That's how we get stuck. That's how we get misaligned. That's how we get sick, because all of this energy is coming through us, wanting to fulfill our destiny, wanting to be our highest potential, wanting to bring this good in the world. And if we have resistance or fears or laziness, whatever it is that we're dealing with that causes this resistance, that energy backs up. And it prevents the expression of this energy in the world. And that's an unhealthy flow of this intuitive energy. So we have to act on it. So we have a duty and a responsibility to follow our intuitions when we get them. So that's the second part, is, getting those first impressions and then living our truth from those impressions, which I call the process of resonance. So you use resonance to follow that path we just talked about, right? We're talking about the path, our path that we are. It's resonance that's going to take you. It's that yes feeling, right? You got to follow that and intuitively make the decisions to flow through and live your truth.
And yet you do have to do that enough times to get the results of it working in order to trust it. So you do have to say yes. And I love how you're saying that if you don't, it's the block, because what I think that block is I didn't trust myself. And so it sort of shuts down the flow.
Trust. It's all about trust. You hit the nail on the head. I mean, that is the magic word. We can talk about all this stuff until like the cows come home, but what it's really all about at the end of the day is trust. Trust is that magical thing that it's going to shift in your life. It's going to create that upgrade, because when you get to the point where you can trust yourself, your higher self, right? Not our little small s self, our higher self. When we trust that and honor that, magical things happen in your life. I mean, it could be scary. It can be a lot of change, but that is the center of intuition. And you do have to, in some cases, I mean, you do have to build up a trust over time, and we work on that. We get validations, and the work that we do is we focus on different ways to start building that trust, so that, this is what it feels like. Yeah, this is how an intuition feels. And yes, I've done this. I've gotten this right before, and I'm going to continue to live by it.
And I think the trust is the same thing that religions have been saying for a long time. I think people are sort of, getting blocks about that and about faith just because of issues with the church and so forth. But I think it's the same thing at the heart of it, which is faith and trust and love and hope, all those things. It's the same thing whenever you're trusting yourself. It's like, that bigger idea of faith. And that is when magic happens. It's the same thing at the core. So I want to wrap it up with saying, first off, is there anything else you wanted to add in that we didn't really talk about?
Yeah, this is great. This is a great conversation.
Well, it's really important to me that that people get the tools. Like I thought, if we'd have known this 40 years ago and learned, like I'm teaching my daughter now to grow up with it, how different her life is going to be to have these tools.
Yeah.
Those answers that I was looking for all those years ago, and other people to know where they are and to start off in your life like that. So it's really important to me. And I wanted to talk to you about your tagline, "To your own higher self be true." I think that goes a perfect ending to what we're talking about here. So why did you pick that tagline, and what does that mean to you?
Really, because it really sums up everything that I work for, which is embodying that spirit of trust. And the higher self is our connection with God and the supreme being, whatever your word is, for the eternal I am of the universe. So being true to that and trusting that if we can do that in our lives, then we can do anything.
Agreed. So you mentioned your class you have coming up. Do you want to mention to anybody what you have going on, where they can find you?
Yeah, I do an intuition masterclass twice a year. It's an online class, so it's available to people all over the world. And we launched our first class this fall, and it's amazing. We have 26 people in it from all over the globe, from Sweden to Boston to the West Coast to Pittsburgh, everywhere. And it's just an amazing community of men and women who are coming together to develop their intuition together. So having this experience, I'm really seeing how bringing a community together around this is so transformative, because we often do this work alone, right? A lot of us, we're doing this, and there's not spiritual communities around us that are full of like-minded seekers and people that we can share these things with. So if it's something that you're out there and you're interested in intuition, I invite you to go to my website, kimchesney.com, and I have a free intuition awakening guide there too, which will get you started on all this stuff. So and it really embodies a lot of the stuff we talked about today. And you can check that out and then learn more if you want to take a deep dive into your intuition and really start to master this stuff. It's a great 6-week program.
That's wonderful. I think we really need that. There are no schools for intuition. So we're the schools, and that's what a life coach and a intuition kit is.
Intuition lab.
Yeah, there you go. I like that.
I started the intuition school. And I'm doing certifications. We're going to be work on building that out, and teacher training and all kind of crazy stuff. So we're in it to win it on this intuition stuff, spreading the word, sharing this with people on a very practical, demystified level. But it's not woo. We're not going to be talking to spirit guides. There's none of that. This is really treating it as a very practical process that aligns with people at all places in life. And it aligns with all religions. My husband was in the Catholic seminary to be a priest. I have had a long history with the Christian religion. And I can tell you all of that stuff is nothing but connected and aligned with intuition.
I 100% agree. Yeah.
It's all on the same page.
It really is. It's just a different language and the way to explain it. And you can, once you deep dive, you can get into that place where you can take it to a more mystical level. But again, that's just personal choice. It really just starts with, like what the normal language for intuition is, which is your gut instinct, that animal instinct that we're all born with. I like to talk a lot about what your human nature is. That's just human nature. So there's, like you said, there's nothing woo about it. But if you want, you can use it to take you even further down that path. So
yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you can go as deep as you want with it. If it's something that you want to use on a practical level, you can. But if it's something that you really are feeling that, you're in a place in your spiritual growth where you need to really immerse yourself. Like the most intuitive people were like the yogis of the East. I mean, they had amazing intuition. Like their psychic ability, it becomes a byproduct of your spiritual evolution at a certain point. And we'll just have to see how it all unfolds. It's not an easy thing to learn. It takes work and time, but it's really worth it. It's really worth it.
I 100% agree. Like your life rises up to meet you at whatever level you're at. And just even determining, just whenever I make plans and I check in with my intuition, things just go so easy. I find, just down to the most finite details of perfection, the way things could go. So it really is practical, but magical at the same time. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it was wonderful talking to you. I just wanted to mention to Friends of Life University, you can always go to the website. What I have available for you guys is just to be available for whatever it is you need. I'm very specific on, do you want to just read a blog, or do you want to, you can submit a free question anytime, and we'll just talk about whatever topic, like we're talking about intuition today. And then if you want more of a deep dive with me, you can do the individual emails for a private response, or you can actually have life coaching sessions, which we do, longer deep dives too. So we're here for you. I'm at lifeuniversity.net. Kim is at her website, and it was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. All right, we'll see you soon.
Thanks. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.